Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, I hope you all got to see this image on Sunday of the NOAA hurricane hunter flying into the eye of Category 5 strength Hurricane Dorian. Dorian had a history of producing wind speeds over 200 miles an hour. Those were wind gusts over 200 miles an hour. And at Category 5 in strength, it makes it quite a rare storm. Normally, we say that there's a Category 5 strength hurricane maybe every other year. But if you look back over the last 4 years, we had Hurricane Matthew in 2016, Irma and Maria in 17, Michael in 18, and now Dorian in 19. Those were all Category 5 strength storms just in the last 4 years. And NOAA's Hurricane Hunter gave this incredible video as they penetrated the eye wall here and collected vital information so that we could better forecast and understand this particular hurricane here. Now it is Labor Day, and just a little bit of history here. Labor Day at 1935, the Labor Day hurricane in 1935, is the most powerful landfalling tropical system that we know of in modern history in the United States. And so this is a time of year that we expect to see a lot of stuff like this. Now take a look at this zoomed in view here. This is from GOES 16. We're following the eye of Hurricane Matthew as it approached Hurricane Dorian as it approached the Bahamas here. And as it did so, just did an incredible amount of damage. And the problem is that it slowed down. You may have heard me slip up there and call this Matthew, and that's because there are some interesting similarities in where Dorian is going compared to Matthew. And I want to talk with you about that path and the speed of this system, because it's going to be critical to understanding what it does, as you just saw the sunset there on Sunday night on this powerful hurricane. Well, early in the morning here, this is an infrared satellite animation that goes to about 4 o'clock in the morning when I was doing this recording. And this particular storm is moving very slowly. It is very powerful and very symmetric, at least toward its center. We do have some concern that it might go through an eye wall replacement cycle in the coming hours. But the fact that it is slow is actually critical to so many pieces for the United States in the coming days here. But take a look at this. This is a snapshot of it at 12:44 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And this is what it looked like at 4:03. And look, this is all that it moved in 4 hours. And that's not much. And that's because its current westward speed is only 1 mile an hour. So where is it going? Let's turn our attention now to the ensembles from the European on the left and the GFS on the right. And if we take an ensemble average, we typically see that the storm track is going to do something like this. Now, there is major uncertainty beyond even the next 10 to 12 hours on where this is going to go. And a lot of that has to do with storm depth and steering currents throughout the multiple layers of the atmosphere. But most guidance keeps this just offshore in Florida. This does not mean it won't eventually make landfall possibly in Georgia or more likely in South Carolina or North Carolina if it's going to make landfall. But it doesn't even matter. If you put the storm here, just remember that on the northern side of this, you're going to have winds coming onshore like this in very slowly moving storms, persistently battering the coast with strong onshore winds on the north side means storm surge, major storm surge and flooding. But after the storm system passes on the south side, the winds are going to blow offshore, which means we're going to take everything we just pushed onshore, all that water, and then take it right back out to open ocean. And that's the analogy with Matthew. So if you're along the Florida coast and you remember what Matthew did, it's not to say this is a perfect match, but this is a very similar track that Matthew took, and they were both powerful hurricanes. I want you to also remember one other thing. When you think about where those hurricane force winds are, they generally extend 40 to 60 miles away from the center of the hurricane. And that's important because as we look to where this one's going to go, it will be the proximity to shore to tell us who gets these incredibly damaging and destructive winds. Now, our problem is that we've got several different features steering this hurricane throughout multiple layers of the atmosphere. There's certainly a huge ridge here diving into a trough that's right now moving through the Ohio River Valley. There's this elongated ridge in the lower levels of the atmosphere sitting in this area that's helping to steer it. We still have this very weak upper level low that's sitting over here. And when we put all this together, we just don't have much in the way to push this hurricane. Now, it turns out that could be a very good thing because as Dorian sits there and spins, it will be extracting heat from the ocean. And as it does that, that actually removes a source of heat that the hurricane can use to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, it's not to say that it's going to be weakening substantially, but it's basically using its vital resource of heat, ocean heat, and exhausting it, and therefore could be beneficial to weakening this hurricane somewhat. But the best model guidance we have right now is that even though right now it's moving so slowly and is still about 110 miles offshore, the best model guidance, I'm going to turn right over to the National Hurricane Center. You can see they are expecting it to just skirt right here along the coast. Now, what I did was I followed the center of that track. But understand, the width of that cone of influence here represents their historical average error at those different time steps with the evolution of a hurricane. So this does not mean that it's going to follow the middle track. It very well could get very close and hit the Florida coast. It could skirt right there through Georgia, North, South Carolina. We are not out of the woods. And even if it doesn't, this is still going to be a major precipitation maker and have a lot of coastal beach erosion. This is going to certainly be hammering our coast very, very hard in the coming days here. And by the way, this isn't the only thing. We're still watching a feature coming out of the Bay of Campeche that could be moving into southern Texas. Not a hurricane, but certainly messy. We have a system out here that we're not concerned too much about, but look at what came off the west coast of Africa. So it's the peak of hurricane season. We're moving into it. We're just 12 days away from the peak, and it's just that time of year. We got to watch all of this, okay? So let me bring it back to the major threat we've had all along with Hurricane Dorian. In addition to those winds, it's going to be the flooding rains. Remember, parts of Florida have been extremely wet throughout August, so dumping this additional rainfall is going to be very detrimental. Look at the hard edge on the back side of this, though. Our models are really keeping that hard edge in place here with where the outer spiral rain bands are going to be hitting. So very, very little rainfall over the next several days in through this area that I'm kind of hashing here. But right along the coast, we could be bringing in over some regions that are even in drought right now, maybe 6 to 10 plus inches of rain. It's kind of hard to put an upper limit on the rainfall, just depending on how the rain band's set up. But the slow-moving nature of this is what is going to be disastrous in terms of the potential for storm surge and very heavy rainfall. Meanwhile, take a look at the backside of this. Now, this is the national blended model. So we got the European in this, we got the GFS and all the other models we run in the US. We do see that there is a corridor right in through here that is looking very, very wet, right up the spine of the Rockies. Multiple systems coming through here in the next several days, while to the south of that, relatively dry. So let's now turn our attention away from the tropics and take a look at what we've got elsewhere. The weekend was exceptionally wet for some folks. We saw some very locally heavy rain in here around Springfield and St. Louis, coming back over to parts of eastern Kansas and western Missouri. This region here been hit many, many times. And a complex of storms we saw that moved through here, bringing in some very heavy rainfall as well. Outside of that, you can see the other major systems sweeping through here. And the question is, are we adding much more to that in the coming days? Our global models are in agreement that over the next 2 weeks, this corridor right in through here is wet. Multiple systems coming through. They are also in agreement that this area is much drier than normal. And so that agreement's got me thinking, what does that storm track look like? And let's figure that out by going right up to the upper levels of the atmosphere. Now, this animation is critical for understanding both our temperature and precipitation over the coming days. We can see that throughout this week, I just got you out here to 7 a.m. on Wednesday, deeper trough that's moving through basically between the Hudson Bay and Great Lakes. That trough might eventually help grab Dorian and take it on off. But it's the ridge that's behind it that I want you to see. Now, all along the northern periphery of this ridge, we're going to have little short waves that sneak through. They keep coming through just like this, and they move through and they create these weak little storm systems that do produce quite a bit of rain, but run through the Canadian prairies into the northern part of the United States. But watch where this ridge goes, because this is critical for our temperature pattern. So this is Wednesday into Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Now, what we noticed, again, if I just step it back, is systems are running around the northern periphery of this ridge. And I want you to see that as we get into the weekend, this is now Sunday, 7 a.m., this deeper trough right in through here, we're going to talk about what it's going to be doing to the temperatures in the Great Lakes. But did you notice that my ridge is now sitting in the middle part of the United States, and by the weekend, we have a trough moving in out west? Now, there's some critical changes in the Pacific that are allowing this to happen. And we do see that trough becoming pretty well established for a little bit as we get out into the 9th, 10th, and 11th of the month. This trough is going to be excellent for allowing warmth to build back into the area that's been very cool for much of August. I'm talking right in through here. So this trough is a result of much faster flow across the Pacific Ocean. Remember that from back in spring? We had the trough sitting in the Aleutian Islands, the ridge to its south, and the jet stream skirter right in between. Well, it tends to dive over the west coast when that happens, and that trough is in place. So this is a welcomed pattern change for the middle part of the month. And that pattern change, well, we're going to take a look at what it means in terms of temperatures in just a few moments here. First thing, what we're going to watch in the near term, you can see, look at the lightning on the southeastern side of Dorian. Very active convective towers there. We'd still have storms that are in parts of the Ohio River Valley moving into Pennsylvania and New York this morning. We're going to watch them stretch up the East Coast today. The storms early this morning that were in parts of South Dakota and Nebraska, we're going to keep an eye on these as they kind of fizzle throughout the mid-morning hours, moving into parts of Iowa, maybe into northwestern Missouri. It is storming down in the desert, down here in parts of California, Arizona, and Nevada. And these are the storms that folks in the northern plains are going to watch as this first low pressure system goes just like this over the next 48 hours. So we've got a lot of stuff going on here. Let's take a look at what the Storm Prediction Center is looking out for on Monday. Enhanced risk in through this area. Those are the storms that are right now in Alberta and Saskatchewan. We're going to watch them evolve here in a few moments. The low pressure system that does form here will have a front that drags through by the time we get into the day on Tuesday. That's the map that's over here on the right-hand side from the Storm Prediction Center. So we're going to keep an eye on this region for thunderstorm development. So that's your next couple of days. Let's take a look at it from our high-resolution NAM model. I'm going to pause it right here. So what did we see? We noticed the storms spreading through the northeast. See them there? Some storms left over in the Ohio River Valley and some coastal showers here for the Carolinas. Our storms that were in South Dakota move through Nebraska throughout the day, but kind of lose their energy with the late morning stability. So you see them kind of fading here. But our storms that came out of Alberta now into Saskatchewan, then crossing the border, as they move south, see this? This is the storm system that later in the day is going to feed off some of the heating of the day, the moisture that's in place, and they slide across North Dakota and into Minnesota. I've seen multiple model runs supporting these storms coming through this area this evening. Now, in the meantime, you can see the NAM's forecast version of Dorian still here, keeping it off coast. But as I continue on with our animation, overnight hours still very stormy in Minnesota. The next morning, the low now emerges over the Great Lakes states and its front is draped through Wisconsin. So early in the morning, we're going to watch for something to build on that front such that by mid-afternoon, this is our area that could be seeing some widely scattered showers and storms, some of which have the potential to become severe. And then that storm system moves on off to the northeast by the time we get through the day on Tuesday. So again, it's this corridor and through here that has the potential for seeing some storms. These do appear to fizzle by the time they get into the Mid-South and the Ohio River Valley, though, in the overnight hours Tuesday into Wednesday morning. So that's the storm system we're watching here in the coming days, the next 2 days through parts of the Corn Belt, while Dorian is just hanging off coast down here. Now let's switch over to our longer range models here, and let's just play this one out and pause it right there. So I've taken you out so far out to this point on Wednesday, so we're going to pick up here. So our low pressure system is in this corridor, and there's the front that's dangling from the southern part of it. Now watch what happens through parts of the Corn Belt. High pressure moves in by Wednesday morning. See it there? And big dome of high pressure occupies this area. Dorian, meanwhile, is just off the Georgia coast, off the South Carolina coast, and it is moving toward kind of the Cape Hatteras region. A new low begins to emerge here. It's a relatively weak one in the Dakotas. This is in the overnight hours on Wednesday, getting into Thursday morning. And that one may bring widely scattered showers and storms right again into the same corridor in the overnight hours on Wednesday into Thursday morning. Now watch as we play this forward, though. Getting you out toward the end of the week, this is when our trough begins to build in out west. So you can now see widely scattered showers and storms there. And watch what happens in the middle part of the country, okay? Saturday, this is now overnight Friday into Saturday morning. I want you to see this big area of high pressure moving in. Storms all along its periphery. See it here? This is why we keep this corridor so wet. Storms all along the periphery. And then this is where things get interesting. This is now Sunday morning. Now you can see the big area of high pressure sitting here. You can see the scattered showers and storms hitting an area that's been hit multiple times. And that right there, well, I want you to keep an eye on that high pressure center because I'm going to show you what the temperatures do. Now, our global models, including the GFS and the European model, both want to emerge some very large storm systems. See it here? By early next week. Remember, this is the time when we start to get that trough here with the ridge over the southeast. If this has got you thinking back about spring, yep, this is kind of what we saw. Now, is that storm going to be riding through this part of the country, or is it going to be up here in Canada? That is still up for debate. We're going to have to watch this very, very carefully with time, but certainly the upper levels of the atmosphere are open to producing some sort of large storm system at this point. I don't want to take you much beyond our 1 week forecast with a single model here, but just remember, this is the corridor that we saw over the next, 2 weeks. It stays quite active. Okay, so take a look at what temperatures do. This is going to play fast, but I'm going to bring it back and show you. Here is your low temperatures for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There's our first front sweeping through. Remember the first one? Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Now there's the second front. The big high pressure system settles in right here over the Great Lakes states. And what do we see? Well, we see some cooler, drier air with lower winds, and therefore in the the north woods of Wisconsin, getting up the UP of Michigan, we might be able to get our low temperatures down here close to the freezing mark. But remember, what happens after this is that larger ridge moves in. So the cooler air we've had in this area, while we've tucked a lot of heat back in Texas and into the western United States, well, that flow pattern is going to change such that over the next 5 days, yes, we get this cool in here while the west stays very warm. But by day 6 through 10, our trough comes in this area, and this trough exits, and warmth begins to spread in through here. Look at what happens by days 11 through 15. So what is this? This is September 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. Over that time period, while that trough builds in out this direction, we see warmer than average conditions spreading in through this area, and that's something that we need to see. This is very good. This is a great forecast to eliminate that early mid-September frost threat for a lot of folks. So that's the latest model trend from over the weekend. I'm excited to be able to point that out. Elsewhere around the world, I want to take you to Brazil. First of all, year-on-year vegetation health index, again, we can see how very dry things have been. We've seen a lot of fires burning in the pastures down here, and a lot of this just simply due to how the fact that it's been so very dry. You can see that since June, very little rainfall. They built up a sizable deficit throughout Brazil's major soybean growing area. Translation, this is an area that's going to take a considerable amount of time to bring up the soil moisture content before they plant a crop. They have time to do it, but the near-term forecast is actually continuing to stay dry in that area. And finally, I want to take you over to Asia. The Indian monsoon locally producing some very heavy flooding, but when you look on the whole, the monsoon this year has been much closer to average than in previous years. We've had a discussion about what's going on in China. Our two main growing areas we're going to focus on, north of the Korean Peninsula and in and around and south of Beijing. Now we know that north of the Korean Peninsula, we've been very wet and built up a huge surplus of rainfall. But this particular region, which is forecast over the next week or so to continue to stay dry, is really hanging on to a dry bias. Why you see them above average is because of a typhoon that hit. So that brought in a bunch of rain temporarily, but it's been very dry before and after that. So this is an area that's really been struggling for precipitation as of late. And finally, some of the lower predictability we have right now in our long-range forecast, we are watching two separate tropical systems in the Western Pacific that could be moving and getting absorbed into the jet stream flow. And that's going to change the flow pattern across the Pacific and ultimately North American weather. So to finish up, I just want to make one simple statement. If you are in the path of Hurricane Dorian, please check in 8 o'clock this morning Eastern Time. You will get an update from the National Hurricane Center, nhc.noaa.gov. Check it out, please. For the rest of us, I hope you have a great week and a very safe and happy Labor Day. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you from all of us at Nutrien Ag Solutions. Have a great week. Thank you.